Well, the Browns are back in the second round of the playoffs for the first time in this century, in the 21st century. Last time the Browns were in the second round, Bill Belichick was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, which means that the entire Patriots dynasty hadn't even been born yet, was born, reigned, dominated, won 6 Super Bowls, and then died before the Cleveland Browns won another playoff game. So that is something most definitely to celebrate, and an accomplishment that is had. It is worth celebrating, absolutely 100%. But will that be all the Browns celebrate? Because in this round, they draw the Super Bowl champion, what many think is the best team in the NFL, Kansas City Chiefs. So how did the Browns match up? Well, you might be surprised. Why? Let's talk about it. Real quick before I get into that, I want to make sure I give a shout out to the patreon.com dog check tier members. And as always, they start with
Michael Matique, Greg Ealer, Seth Harrison, Corporal Nick Lopez, Nick Nasty, Mandela Moore, the only Browns fan in Wisconsin, Batman, Jake Phillips, Rush Shear, Barack Kumar, John Alver, Masayua, Budza Roland, Ethan Rindauer, James Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Justin Cole, Philip Wilcoxon, Marie Vivert, Timothy McClure, Keith Anderson, Joshua Still, Sean Barron, Gagos Pisano, Dom Gazzulo, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216, Anthony Latham, Christian, Matt Bond, Dave Strong, Michael Stone, Soul Train, Charles Work, Dan in West Texas, Billy, Michael Holdenack, Jared Austin, Dylon W, Josh Bendor, Dylan Hell, Andrew Sedejo, David Maldonado, Chad Gimme, Rex Kaufman, Edrin Hall, James McGinley, Brody Cook, Moose Gentry, Patrick F, Austin Z, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, IT Rex, Austin Bolin, Jesus Serrano, Joshua Paulus, Chris Farms, Pick Down Browns Backers, Mark Kahn, Max Out Dojo, Beerman 069, SSJ Swift, Andrew Hirsch, Feeling Dangerous 113, Dave Mike May, John Cummings, Robert Germain, Cleveland BCI, Anthony O, Bobo Regretti, Stuart Moore, TJ Showman on cue, Mark M, Jalil Salim Sr., Martha Crusnut, Joe Bobby, Sean McGinty, Carlos Moreno, Musty Taco, Frankie B and Matt the Aggie, Mud Duck, Brad Calbo, Keith Gurkak, Ryan T, Jonathan Fredericks, CK, Eric Green, Joseph Stevens, and Water Bear Marketing.
Oftentimes when we talk about football, we talk about how much talent a team has versus how much talent another team has. But rarely, in the NFL at least, does that ever matter. Football at the highest level is about matchups. That's the most important thing. How do these two teams match up? Not who has the most talent, who has the best quarterback. Those things matter at some point, but who matches up better tends to win the game. So speaking of matchups, let's talk about the first matchup I'm going to talk about, which is the Browns defense versus this vaunted Chiefs offense. So when you come into this game, you see Kansas City Chiefs versus the Cleveland Browns. If you're a Browns fan, obviously you're going to be worried about the wide receivers and the tight ends, right? Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, all of these great players that they have in their wide receiving core that can stretch the field and go deep. That's definitely a problem, but there are more intricacies in smaller things that are more dangerous with the Kansas City Chiefs than just the deep threat that you see or the 4 verticals that everybody talks about that the Kansas City Chiefs love to run. One of those things is that the Chiefs are actually one of the trickiest and slippery teams in NFL. And what I mean by that is, like, literally on every drive or every play, there is some kind of trickery going on with the play. They love changing the point of attacks. They love reverses, counter reverses, reverse counter reverses, where the running back gets the ball to the wide receiver who throws it back to the running back who throws the ball down the field. They love all of that stuff. Go watch any Kansas City Chiefs game. You will see trick plays, but the Kansas City Chiefs run them so much, I don't even think they're trick plays anymore. There will be a ton of that, a ton of pre-snap movement, a ton of motions, a ton of realignment. They have one play where they just spin around into position. They do a ton of stuff pre-snap when it comes to movement, when it comes to getting the pocket move, when it comes to getting people moved around, for identifying different coverages and where people are going to be, or trying to force some miscommunication or force a pick play. They do all of that, and they do it all pretty well. They have a crazy screen game as well with 2 running backs who can do really well off screens. Le'Veon Bell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's going to play this week. They tend to move a lot. They tend to move the pocket a lot after the snap. They do a lot. Their screen game is amazing. They have reverse screens, tight end screens, fullback screens. They're going to do it all at the line of scrimmage. They're going to play a lot of games on the line of scrimmage. One of those reasons is because they don't really trust their offensive line. The other one of those reasons is because they have so many weapons that making you choose which one's going to kill you is enough to just make your defense implode from the inside out. That part of it, right? Not even the deep threat part of it. The pre-snap, the trickery, the games that the Chiefs like to play before and immediately after the snap, those are going to be things that the Browns really have to worry about, because communication and not running into each other on pick plays has been a problem for this team all season. Now, to be fair to the Browns, since Ronnie Harrison's come back, or whenever Ronnie Harrison's out there playing significant snaps, it's not an issue, but this is going to be a massive test, right? Pittsburgh was not creative to a fault the last 2 weeks. This is definitely not anywhere close to the same. This is the most creative offense, I think, in recent football. They are extremely creative. They will be creative. You'll see things you have never seen before when it comes to play design, pre-snap motion, all of these things. They get real creative in Kansas City. That's going to be something that the Browns have to keep an eye on. Another thing that the Browns are going to have to keep an eye on are some of these matchups in the secondary, right? The slot matchup's going to be key, because you have Malcolm Smith and Kevin Johnson, who tend to handle slot responsibilities, which are going to be, Miko Harmon and Travis Kelce. That's who they're going to have to cover. That's going to be an interesting one. Malcolm Smith has held up in coverage, and whenever Kevin Johnson is in there, they do well against tight ends. I know people are going to point out the game that they gave up a good amount of yardage, or key yardage, to Mark Andrews in Baltimore, but I have to say that wasn't a game where Kevin Johnson was playing. So that's a little bit of a different situation there. So that's going to be an issue, but all the other matchups you feel as well as you could, I guess, against the Chiefs about them. Tyreek Hill on Denzel Ward, you'll live or die with that, right? If Tyreek Hill has a big game on Denzel Ward, well, props to Tyreek Hill. That's a pretty good thing to do. I mean, Denzel Ward is an elite corner. If Tyreek can just burn him, I don't know what else you could do at that point. And then you'll have Terrence Mitchell on Sammy Watkins. I like that matchup. Terrence Mitchell and Sammy Watkins, I think they match up pretty well. So again, you're not in a great position with the secondary. You definitely have some issues that the Chiefs are definitely going to exploit. Expect to see a healthy amount of them getting Mark Andrews to shift and motion around enough to where he ends up being guarded by like an Andrew Sadejo or a Carl Joseph. That definitely will happen. They definitely will run some shenanigans that will work at some point to get the matchups that they want. That's going to be there. Now, how can the Browns stop the Chiefs offense or slow them down or put, a stick in their wheel? Here's how they can do that. The Chiefs have a middling offensive line. They're not a great offensive line, but they're not bad enough to be talked about in a negative way. They just are not as good as you would hope. Now, they're missing Mitchell Schwartz, but they've played solidly without Mitchell Schwartz, and honestly, the level of play of that offensive line is not much different with Remmers out there than it is with Mitchell Schwartz, as good as Mitchell Schwartz has been in his career. And one of the things that's pretty telling about the offensive line is that while they are 15th in pressures, which is not terrible, right? They have not given up a ton of pressures. They are one of the least blitz teams in the NFL, because nobody in the right mind is going to blitz Patrick Mahomes. I believe they're like in the bottom 5 when it comes to teams that are blitzed in the NFL. So you're not getting blitz, but you're still kind of in that top half when it comes to pressures. That is something that is an issue. And when you look at this offense, a lot of the reason you see all this creativity and all this pre-snap stuff is so they can avoid having their offensive line bottleneck this offense. But even with those efforts, the offensive line has bottlenecked this Chiefs offense a little bit. The Chiefs not having enough time to go down the field as much as they would like. These are all things that have kind of bottlenecked the Chiefs offense. And again, let me not make this sound like it's a huge bottleneck. It's not, but it's one that's there, and it's one that can be taken advantage of. These are all the tall tale signs of a coaching staff that just doesn't trust the personnel on the offensive line. So what can the Browns do to attack that? Well, it's obvious, right? Myles Garrett is going to have to be the man of the hour. Larry Ogunjobi, Sheldon Richardson, of course, but Myles Garrett most importantly, because I don't think the Chiefs are going to be willing, like Pittsburgh is, to keep a lot of their offensive weapons or their position groups in just to block Myles Garrett. What happened in Pittsburgh was they doubled Myles and they rotated over Myles and they had help with Myles with the tight ends and the running back. I don't think the Chiefs are going to keep dangerous weapons like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell, and Travis Kelce in at the line of scrimmage just to handle Myles Garrett, which means that at worst, Myles is going to see a double team, a traditional double team, which is going to free up everybody on one-on-ones, or at best, they just try to block Myles straight up. And if that's the case, Myles needs to have a big game, create pressure, along with the other people on that defensive line to create pressure with that front four so the Browns can avoid blitzing. Because blitzing against Patrick Mahomes, not a solution. No, that's not going to help. Blitzing against Patrick Mahomes is a death sentence. It will kill you. You might get home once or twice, but it is a mirage. It will kill you. It has killed everybody who has tried in the last 3 years. It will kill you. You're not good enough to blitz Patrick Mahomes. It's not going to work. Pittsburgh at its height could not blitz Patrick Mahomes when Patrick Mahomes is like 2 games into his career. It does not work. Do not do it. He has a 16-1 touchdown to interception ratio. If you blitz him, sure, you're going to get pressure. Are you going to tackle him, though? That's an underrated thing with Patrick Mahomes. He can escape the pocket. He can definitely throw downfield, and he's a lot sturdier and hard to tackle than people give him credit for. So even if you do blitz him, you better get him on the ground, because if you don't, he's going to find Tyreek Hill down the field, 50 yards, 4 touchdowns. So do not blitz Patrick Mahomes. It is not a winning strategy. It has never worked in 3 years. It will not work. Do not do it. That being said, I get the temptation to do it, because if you're thinking, like I'm thinking, boy, these safeties are going to get tested. Yes, the safeties will get tested if you don't get pressure. And one of the ways to guarantee you get pressure is to blitz. But, no, that's not the solution. And I get it. The other solutions don't sound great, but the Chiefs are a really good team, so the solutions aren't ever going to sound great. And the solution is you got to hope that your front four can get pressure alone. If your front four can't get pressure alone, changes everything, right? If you can win that battle on the line of scrimmage with your front four alone, changes everything, changes the effectiveness of all the screen, all the pre-snap stuff, their ability to test your safeties downfield, how much time. All of that stuff becomes a lot more effective and a lot easier to stop if you can win that battle on the defensive line. But the margin of error you give yourself, if you send 7 or 6, sometimes even 5 with Patrick Mahomes, is too slim to take a risk on. So that's what the Browns need to do. Myles Garrett, Larry Ogunjobi, Sheldon Richardson, Porter Gustin, Adrian Claiborne, whoever's stepping up in the absence of Olivier Vernon, y'all need to get pressure on the front with the front four. Now, the good news is the offensive line is not so good that won't happen. And you do have Myles Garrett, who changes everything about how they have to do protections and scheme up on that front. So it is definitely possible. But that is what has to happen on the defensive side of the ball for the Browns to slow down this Chiefs offense. Denzel Ward being back is going to be a nice part of it. Kevin Johnson being back is going to also be a nice part of it. Malcolm Smith, all these guys being back will be a nice part of it. I'm not trying to downplay their role, but the defensive line is the main part. All right, so for the Browns offensive unit, it's not as daunting as the other side, right? When you look at the late season tape on the Kansas City Chiefs, you look at what they're good at, what they're not good at, where their strengths are, where their strengths aren't, and against a team like the Cleveland Browns, you can see where they can have some issues defensively. Kansas City has a good secondary, but they're limited to how good they can be because the defensive line itself, unless Chris Jones has a extra favorable matchup on that defensive line, he's able to just penetrate by himself. They just don't have enough on that defensive line to create pressure by themselves. So they end up blitzing a lot, which ends up leaving those DBs on the island. So while they are decent DBs, they're left on the island far too often, which puts them in very vulnerable positions. And I get Tyrann Mathieu is a really good safety. Baker has played a ton of really good safeties this year. Jesse Bates, Minka Fitzpatrick like 3 times this year, so he has experience going against top-tier safeties. So that's not going to be anything new to them. They have some decent corners. L'Jarius Sneed is a really good slot corner. Javarius Ward is pretty good. They have Breland, Fenton, decent corners, not bad corners at all, but they just get left on islands way too often, which is going to be a benefit for the Browns. And when you talk about islands, you have to talk about the Chiefs and blitzing. Is it going to be successful? Well, not always. Just like their offensive line had some stats where they would do something X amount of times, but the success would rank lower than the amount of times they're doing, which is not necessarily good. Same thing happens with the Chiefs defense when you talk about their blitzing percentage. 9th in the NFL in blitzing percentage, 11th in pressure percentage. So they're 9th in the amount of blitzing, but they're 11th in the amount of pressures they're creating, and 19th in total sacks. So that tells me that blitzing is out of necessity, not because it's a strength. You look at Pittsburgh's numbers when they blitz, they're ridiculous. So that, on top of them having to play a Browns offensive line that's number 1 in both run and pass blocking according to PFF, is definitely somewhere where the Browns should see a lot of opportunity, especially if the Browns offensive line is back to full strength. You should get Joe Bitonio back. You don't know if you're going to have Jack Conklin. That will be found out later in the week. But Joe Bitonio, J.C. Tretter, Wyatt Teller, those 3 who are all top 10 interior offensive linemen will be playing, and that's important because the Chiefs' biggest chance or their best player on that defensive line is by far, in a way, Chris Jones. It's not even close on that defensive line. And his best matchup would probably be against Wyatt Teller because Wyatt Teller's a really good run blocker and a pretty good pass blocker. And Chris Jones is the exact opposite, where Chris Jones is a decent run defender, but a really good pass rusher. So maybe they try to get that fit on them. But the trouble in that is that J.C. Tretter, Joe Bitonio, the Browns' offensive line is so good that they can match up with the rest of your defensive line almost one-on-one and combo whoever they want. So that's going to be something to keep up with. Also, the Browns' running backs and tight ends also pick up blitzes pretty well. And I said it for a while, right? The Cleveland Browns, if a team is not able to penetrate on the defensive line against his offensive line, both in run and pass, then they're going to have a really hard time stopping what the Cleveland Browns do offensively. That has been the key all year. Any team that has done anything against the Cleveland Browns, you'll see pressure, penetration, all that stuff will be kind of in that soup of things that it took to beat the Browns this year. The Chiefs really don't have a ton of that. They have Chris Jones. Frank Clark has had a up and down year. And then everybody else, it's not the same level as a team like the New York Giants defensive line or the Baltimore Ravens defensive line or the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line. Defensive lines that the Browns have played and stood up against, the Chiefs just aren't on that level of depth or talent there. So that's going to be an interesting matchup, and that's a battle on the line of scrimmage that the Browns should be able to win. So if you're keeping track, defensively, the Browns have a chance to win that battle on the line of scrimmage. Offensively, the Browns should win that battle on the line of scrimmage, and that's going to be key when you're talking about winning this game. Because, again, offensively, if the Browns can get that line of scrimmage sold up, then everything else tends to come, right? You have enough time to pick apart zone with Baker Mayfield. Your running game can get going. All of those things tend to happen when the offensive line wins their battle up front. Upsets happen in football when you win the line of scrimmage on both sides. Think about this. The Jets have beaten 2 teams this year that are in the divisional round of the playoffs. They have 2 wins. They're both their wins against 2 teams that are in the second round of the playoffs. You know how they did that? In both those games against the Rams and the Browns, they won the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. It's really that simple. If you win both lines of scrimmages in football, you have a chance to win a game no matter who you're playing or how much better that team is. That's what the Browns have the opportunity to do against the Chiefs, because it will be an upset. Not a gigantic upset, but it will be an upset if the Browns win this game. How can they do it? Dominate both lines of scrimmage. Well, how are they positioned to do that? Pretty well. You look at the offensive side of the ball for the Browns, they should be able to win that battle. You look at the defensive side of the ball for the Browns, it's a battle that nobody's really guaranteed or favored to win, but the Browns definitely can win that battle of scrimmage. They've won that battle on the defensive side of the ball before, so it wouldn't be obscene if they did it. There are multiple paths of victory. If you dominate those lines of scrimmages, you're not talking about having to get a ton of turnovers on a team that does not turn the ball over. You're just talking about limiting possessions and taking advantage when you get the ball and scoring, which is possible if you win both of those battles. Trust me, I have a healthy respect for how good the Kansas City Chiefs are. They are really good. Patrick Mahomes is all-time great already in his third year. Travis Kelce is really good. Tyreek Hill is amazing. Sammy Watkins is crazy to think he's like third or fourth on this rotation. Mecole Hardman would be a number one receiver on some teams. Like, they have so much talent, so much firepower in their skill positions, but skill position players are sometimes like sports cars or a luxury super fast jet, right? If you can't get that jet off the tarmac, it becomes essentially useless. And the Browns have an opportunity, and they should approach this game to make sure that jet does not get off the tarmac. Ground that plane. How do you ground them? Win that battle on the line of scrimmage. Because if you can get pressure consistently and they have to bottleneck their offense by running screens or going short more than they would like to go deep, and kind of limit the explosiveness of their offense to accommodate for that, that is an absolute win for your defense right there. Yes, the Chiefs are obviously going to score points. They might score 21. They might score 28. The Browns are definitely going to have to put up 30 points at the very least to win this game. But the lower this score is, the better the chance the Browns can win it. And the way you keep that score nice and low is by winning the battles on the line of scrimmage. You can dominate time of possession that way. You can limit possessions that way. You can do a lot of things that will slow down this Chiefs offense if you do that. And that is why I say the Browns match up much better against the Chiefs than a lot of people are kind of giving them credit for. They can do a lot of things that the Chiefs really don't have a ton of great answers for in some critical areas of football. It's going to be relying on some players to step up, absolutely, but the players you are relying to step up, Myles Garrett. That's not that big of a stretch to think Myles Garrett is going to step up in a big game. And I just think the Browns have a wider path of victory than a lot of people are predicting. And I think the Browns can really win this game. It's a lot more realistic than a lot of other people seem to think. I like their matchups. Now, I could be wrong and the Browns get blown out by like 40 points. And, that is what it is. But I do think there is a chance here that the Browns can do a couple of things that will put them in the right position to be successful. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.